The tale recounted the story of a legendary hero, known as the Saint of the Magic Sword, who fought a climactic battle for humanity's survival against the fearsome Demon King. Amid the chaos of their confrontation, the hero leaped high into the air, aiming to strike the Demon King directly. His sword, infused with magical energy, gleamed with power as he swung it. However, the Demon King had anticipated the attack, deflecting it effortlessly and forcing the hero to retreat. Undeterred, the hero regained his footing and charged forward once more. This time, he unleashed a spell that sent a barrage of magical lasers from all directions converging on the Demon King. Yet, the Demon King encased himself in an impenetrable energy shield, rendering the attack futile. Taking advantage of the moment, the Demon King retaliated with a ferocious blast of purple flames that caught the hero off guard. Though surprised, the hero managed to conjure a magical barrier just in time to shield himself, but the force of the attack caused him to lose his sword. Determined to prevail, the hero cast a powerful spell known as Prism Ruler, merging the elements of earth, water, wind, ice, fire, darkness, and light into a single radiant sword. He explained, with confidence, that although the spell was intended as an attack, in his hands, it had become a weapon capable of cutting through anything. Smiling with determination, he swung the magic sword at the Demon King, who raised an arm to block. The strike, however, was devastating, severing one of the Demon King's horns and an arm. Though triumphant, the hero paid a heavy price for his success. His energy nearly depleted, he staggered as the Demon King, clutching his wounds, admitted that he had never imagined anyone could injure him so gravely. Gripping his sword tightly, the hero responded with a smirk, sarcastically asking if this was the Demon King's way of offering a compliment. With his resolve unshaken, the hero prepared for one final blow to end the battle. Unbeknownst to the combatants, their fight was being watched. From the shadows, a group of enigmatic figures observed the two, waiting for the opportune moment. Spotting their chance, they began weaving a colossal spell. One figure, smiling darkly, murmured that the act was regrettable, but necessary for the future. They unleashed a massive purple beam that engulfed both the hero and the Demon King. The sudden attack left neither time to react. The Demon King was obliterated, losing half his body, while the hero collapsed, mortally wounded. As rain began to fall, the hero gazed at the Demon King's lifeless form and pondered whether humanity would thrive or crumble without its greatest foe. Bloodied and broken, he raised his hand toward the sky, declaring himself the pinnacle of humanity as the Saint of the Magic Sword. Filled with regret for failing to protect humanity to the very end, he succumbed to his injuries beneath the falling rain. 1,000 years later, at Burrito Academy, a blonde-haired boy named Daria Westgarden endured relentless bullying from a red-haired youth. Daria was knocked to the ground by a punch, his magic book and sword tumbling from his hands. The red-haired bully sneered at him as his friends laughed mockingly, calling Daria pathetic. The bully stepped on Daria's sword and berated him, insisting that he must choose between magic and swordsmanship, as trying to master both was sheer arrogance. The bully taunted him further, mocking his inability to handle even beginner-level magic or properly wield a sword. Grabbing Daria by the collar, he called him delusional. Despite the pain and humiliation, Daria defiantly declared that he would become a protector of people, just like the Saint of the Magic Sword. This enraged the bully, who kicked Daria in the stomach and dismissed his dream. He mocked the Saint of the Magic Sword as a mere myth and told Daria to face reality. Before leaving, the bully challenged Daria to prove himself by hunting a monster. Determined to prove his worth, Daria ventured into the forest the next day. Fear overwhelmed him as he encountered a fearsome monster. Drawing his sword, he tried to steady his trembling hands. The monster lunged, its claws tearing into his stomach and leaving a deep wound. Collapsing to his knees, Daria recalled his dream of becoming a hero, but found himself succumbing to his injuries as his strength ebbed away. As his life slipped away, a radiant light descended from the heavens, emanating from a stone statue at the heart of Burrito Academy. The light engulfed Daria's body, and within the depths of his unconscious mind, the soul of the Saint of the Magic Sword awakened, realizing it had been reborn in Daria's vessel. When the hero regained consciousness, he was shocked to find himself in an unfamiliar body. As confusion filled him, his instincts kicked in upon noticing the monster still nearby. Using magic, he healed the wound on his stomach and stood to face the creature. Confronting the monster, he asked with calm confidence if it was responsible for injuring the body he now inhabited. The monster lunged, but the hero channeled fire magic into his hands and with a smirk, declared that the person standing before it was someone entirely different. With a decisive strike, he defeated the monster. As the adrenaline faded, the hero reflected on the strange circumstances that had brought him back to life in this unfamiliar era. A new journey awaited the Saint of the Magic Sword in the body of Daria Westgarden. When the hero arrived in the city, exhaustion was evident on his face after walking for so long. Yet, as he took in his surroundings, admiration flickered in his eyes. The cityscape was unlike anything he had seen before, and the modern clothing of its citizens only reinforced how much time had passed. He noted how civilization had advanced far beyond what he remembered. Letting out a sigh, he turned his gaze to the sky, recalling his past, his death, and the circumstances that had kept his soul tethered to this world. As he pondered this, worry crept onto his face. He realized that not just years, but centuries had passed since his time. A glance at his attire revealed a school uniform. This discovery led him to a logical conclusion. He needed information, and the academy was the best place to start. After walking for a few minutes, he reached his destination. Before him stood a grand memorial monument. As he approached, curiosity turned to astonishment. Beneath the monument, a statue of a man stood tall. The craftsmanship was remarkable, but what truly shocked him was the identity of the figure. It was him. A statue, built in his honor. His confusion deepened as he read the inscription, which stated that the academy had been constructed on the very battlefield where he had fought the Demon King. Disbelief washed over him. Holding his head in his hands, he struggled to comprehend the situation. He found it impossible that a barren wasteland had turned into such a thriving city in a seemingly short time. Just then, two students passed by, their conversation catching his attention. They spoke of how the day marked exactly 1,000 years since the Saint of the Magic Sword had defeated the Demon King. A wave of shock struck him as he processed their words. He clenched his fists, questioning why he had awakened after 1,000 years. Looking at his hands, another troubling thought emerged. What had happened to the soul of the body's original owner? His expression darkened as he realized that history had falsely recorded that he had defeated the Demon King. If such an error existed, then something was amiss. He needed answers, and he needed them fast. Determined, he resolved to investigate the past 1,000 years. However, just as he turned to leave, three familiar figures approached, the ones who had tormented the original owner of his body. One of them, a purple-haired youth, sneered at him, calling him clumsy. The hero blinked in momentary confusion before asking if they were talking to him. The two boys flanking the purple-haired youth laughed, mocking him for attempting to master both swordsmanship and magic. The purple-haired youth smirked and stepped closer, taunting him about his rumored failure in the forest. Still piecing things together, the hero asked who they were. Before he could receive an answer, memories flooded his mind. The life of Daria Westgarden, the body's original owner, played before him, and everything clicked. Understanding Daria's suffering, he decided to make the bullies answer for their actions. With unwavering confidence, he took a step forward and declared that he would become the Saint of the Magic Sword of this era. The three troublemakers scoffed and lunged at him, determined to put him in his place. But with a smirk, he summoned a sword of pure energy, stating that he would go easy on them. Gripping the sword with both hands, he swung, sending two of them flying backward with ease. The purple-haired youth froze, his bravado cracking. The hero rested his sword on his shoulder, remarking that Daria must have suffered greatly. The bully's expression wavered, confusion replacing arrogance. Before he could react, the hero dashed forward, leaped into the air, and brought his mana-forged blade down upon him. Though the purple-haired youth managed to block, the sheer force shattered his weapon in half. Without hesitation, the hero struck him with the flat of his sword, sending him crashing into a nearby wall. As he approached, he pointed the blade at the fallen opponent, and with an icy gaze, told him that he was lucky he was merciful. Otherwise, he would be dead. The bully trembled while the hero sighed and turned away, uninterested in further humiliation. However, behind him, the purple-haired youth called out, questioning whether he was truly satisfied with stopping there. He suggested that this was the hero's opportunity for revenge. The hero merely scratched his head, stating that if he went any further, Daria would be saddened. That was simply the kind of person Daria had been. The bully fell silent, unable to comprehend those words. As he wandered through the academy, the hero pieced together another revelation. The original owner of this body shared his lineage. Before he could dwell on the implications, the academy bell rang, signaling the end of the break. An elderly professor stepped forward, glasses perched on his nose, and called out to him, ordering him to head to the training grounds immediately to practice magic. His tone was filled with disdain, and he reminded the hero of his past failures in magic exams. Hostility surrounded him, but the hero was unfazed. Instead, he was eager to see how magic had evolved over the past millennium. At the training grounds, a student demonstrated lightning magic, drawing gasps from his peers. However, the hero remained unimpressed, remarking to himself that such a spell was merely low-tier magic, something a child from his time could easily surpass. Lost in thought, he analyzed the decline of magic. Just then, the professor approached, smirking and mocking him for only observing rather than casting spells. The hero chuckled and inquired about the professor's magical skills. Puffing his chest with pride, the professor boasted that he could wield intermediate magic and a variety of spells. Magic, as the hero soon learned, had been divided into 4 tiers: beginner, intermediate, advanced, and special. He shook his head at how weak mages had become. Then, he turned to the professor and challenged him to a duel, expressing his desire to see just how impressive magic had become. The professor scoffed but agreed, believing the difference in their abilities would be obvious. As the duel commenced, the students murmured among themselves, doubting that a failure like Daria could stand a chance. The professor initiated the battle, casting an advanced spell that fired luminous bullets through multiple magic circles. Without breaking a sweat, the hero waved his hand, effortlessly nullifying the spell and shattering the magic circles. Gasps filled the air as the professor stood frozen in shock. The hero grinned and asked if that was all. Then, with mana swirling around him, he stated that since it was a special occasion, he would show them what true magic looked like. At that moment, our hero gathered a massive amount of energy around his body, forming 2 colossal magic circles. Power crackled in the air as he turned to the professor, and stated that there was no comparison between them. The professor's eyes widened in horror at the sheer magnitude of the energy. His breath hitched. He couldn't believe what he was witnessing. Before he could react, the hero cast cut-down azure, directing it near him. The impact scorched the ground, leaving deep scars in its wake. Frozen in place, the professor was paralyzed by the overwhelming force. Dispelling his magic, the hero strode toward him and calmly pointed out that he would not waste a special tier spell on a mere duel. However, his gaze then sharpened as he warned the professor that if he dared to look down on him again, he might hit him by accident next time. A chill ran down the professor's spine. Yet forcing himself to remain composed, he finally admitted that he acknowledged the hero's abilities, and that his magic had far surpassed his own. Gasps rippled through the students as they whispered in disbelief that Daria's magic had exceeded that of the professor. A small smile tugged at the hero's lips as he clenched his fist, inwardly acknowledging that fewer people would mock Daria from that moment on. Just then, the professor's voice pulled him from his thoughts as he inquired when the hero had gained such power. Caught off guard, the hero felt a trickle of sweat form on his forehead. He pondered how he was supposed to explain it. The doubtful gazes of the students made him uneasy. He considered revealing that the Saint of the Magic Sword resided in his body but dismissed the thought, knowing they wouldn't believe him. Under the professor's scrutinizing stare, he opted for a vague answer, stating simply that he had understood the essence of magic. The professor's frustration erupted as he argued that such an understanding alone could not make the hero stronger than him. However, after a moment, he sighed and conceded that regardless, The hero was no longer the person he used to be. The hero awkwardly admitted that was true. Deep inside, he understood the truth. His magic and knowledge had carried over from his past life. Power didn't just belong to the body. It resided in the soul. Closing his eyes, he mused that someone who was not special would never have been able to change so drastically in a single day. Just as he hesitated, wondering whether he should reveal the truth, a blood-curdling scream shattered the air. Whipping around, he saw a swarm of demonic beasts charging toward them. The professor's expression twisted in shock as he muttered that he had never seen creatures like those before. The hero wondered if they weren't supposed to live in that region. Wasting no time, he flicked his fingers, summoning a lightning spell that struck down one of the beasts instantly. Clenching his fist, he declared that they were weak opponents. Suddenly the monsters launched razor-sharp feathers at him. Without flinching, he waved a hand, unleashing a wall of fire that incinerated the projectiles. He confidently stated that an attack like that would not harm him. Panic spread among the students, and they fled in terror. The hero, baffled, questioned why they were running when they were mages and should have been able to handle the situation. The professor, however, held his ground, casting flash rain at the beasts. Yet, the spell barely scratched them. Disappointed, the hero muttered to himself, wondering if magic had deteriorated to such an extent. Then, he heard someone chanting. Turning, he spotted a red-haired girl summoning flame spear against one of the monsters. However, her attack was too weak to cause any real damage. A faint smile played on his lips as he acknowledged that at least one student had not run away. He believed her courage would make her a great mage someday. Before he could warn her, the beast lunged. In a flash he moved, catching her in his arms. He reassured her that from that day onward she would grow stronger. She stared at him, stunned. Setting her down gently, he demonstrated the correct technique for flame spear and unleashed a volley of fire spears, obliterating the remaining creatures. From afar, the girl watched in awe. Two beasts lunged at him from close range. He smirked, remarking that even the strongest mage had a moment of vulnerability when casting a spell, which was why the best way to counter magic was through close combat. Energy gathered in his palm, forming a sword. He then added that such a strategy was only effective if the opponent was an ordinary person. In an instant, he leaped into the air, blade flashing as he declared his mastery of both swordsmanship and magic. With his technique, Ere Dance King Storm, he tore through the monsters in a single motion. As their bodies collapsed, silence fell over the battlefield. Later, in the Berido Academy library, he winced as pain coursed through his body. His back and hands ached, a harsh reminder that his current form was too weak for prolonged combat. Sighing, he resolved to train his body, recognizing that magic alone would not be enough. As he scanned the library's records, something caught his eye. Every document claimed that the Saint of the Magic Sword had sacrificed himself to defeat Demon King Girenhel, allowing humanity to drive out the demon army. He frowned, questioning how it was possible that the demon who had killed both him and the Demon King had left no trace in history. He wondered what had happened in the past 1,000 years. His head ached from the unanswered questions. A sudden sound snapped him from his thoughts. Following the noise, he arrived at the training grounds and saw the red-haired girl practicing fire magic. She seemed lost in thought. Curious, he approached and inquired whether she was training there. Startled, she turned before offering a small smile. She explained that they had been allowed to train freely until the recent monster attack was dealt with. Bowing slightly, she thanked him for saving her life, admitting that she had wanted to express her gratitude earlier, but that he had disappeared before she could. The hero cringed, recalling how he had fled to avoid the professor's interrogation. She continued, expressing her surprise at how strong he had become. Then, with determination in her eyes, she resumed her training, declaring that she wanted to be strong enough to fight monsters as well. Yet, despite her efforts, her fire spell kept failing. Frustrated, she turned to him and admitted that no matter what she did, she felt like a failure. He observed her closely. She wasn't lacking in willpower, but there was something else. After a moment's thought, he asked her to extend her hand. She blinked but complied. As he placed his hand over hers, she blushed in surprise. He examined her magical energy, and what he found shocked him. He realized that while her reserves were lower than his, such a level was rare even in his past life. Grinning, he informed her that her issue wasn't a lack of magic, but rather an overabundance of it, making control difficult. Then, with absolute certainty, he declared that she had the potential to wield special-tier magic. Saris, the red-haired girl, was taken aback by the hero's statement. Doubt clouded her face as she murmured that it was impossible and that she lacked the talent. Her hands trembled as she added that both students and professors had always told her the same thing. Unfazed, the hero casually responded that those around her were simply too weak to recognize her true strength. His words made Saris's breath hitch. A wave of dizziness overtook her, and she nearly lost her footing. Steadying herself, she shook her head, insisting that it was impossible and that she was a failure. Before she could finish, the hero's voice rang out sharply as he demanded to know whether she wanted to become stronger or was content with remaining weak. His intense gaze locked onto hers as he pressed her for a choice. Saris hesitated, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. But then, with newfound resolve, she declared that she wanted to become stronger. A smile tugged at the hero's lips as he praised her spirit, calling it the mark of a true mage. Taking a step closer, he told her that she might not yet realize it, but she possessed an immense amount of magical energy. Saris blinked in disbelief and questioned whether he was serious. Completely serious, the hero affirmed, explaining that the reason her beginner magic wasn't activating properly was that she was using too much energy. His expression hardened as he pointed a finger at her, reprimanding her for foolishly wasting such a massive amount of magic unnecessarily. His harsh words stung, and Saris felt her eyes well up with tears. However, before she could protest, he continued in a more instructive tone, stating that even controlling the amount of magic used required skill, and that, as she was now, it was impossible for her to cast beginner spells properly. Then, in a softer voice, he reassured her, explaining that there was a type of magic that didn't require concern over the amount of energy used. Special-tier magic. Saris frowned, hesitation creeping back into her voice as she pointed out that even the Academy's headmaster could barely use such magic. The hero's confidence didn't waver, as he told her that if she mastered it, she would stand on equal footing with the headmaster. Her eyes widened in shock as she gasped that it was impossible. The hero merely chuckled and pointed at himself, informing her that he too could use special-tier magic, and that it wasn't as rare as she believed. She barely had time to process his words before he added that special-tier magic required an immense amount of magical energy, but for someone like her, it wouldn't be difficult. Overwhelmed, Saris took a shaky breath and admitted that the conversation was moving too fast for her to keep up. The hero didn't give her time to dwell on it, announcing that he would teach her a special-tier spell immediately. Tears pricked at her eyes, but he continued, assuring her that no elaborate preparations were needed, and that it was just like casting beginner magic. Saris clenched her fists. The thought of wielding special-tier magic terrified her. It was nothing like beginner spells. Could she really do this? The hero took a step back, facing her directly. She swallowed hard, doubt creeping in. She thought to herself that there was no way it was that simple, that she most likely couldn't use special-tier magic. But then, she pushed her fears aside, telling herself that she needed to stop thinking negatively if she truly wanted to become stronger. Steeling herself, she raised her hands forward, ready to cast the spell. The hero observed her with approval, noting that she appeared ready. A new worry surfaced in Saris's mind, and she hesitantly asked whether casting special-tier magic would cause destruction all around her. The hero briefly closed his eyes before opening them again, calmly acknowledging that under normal circumstances, it would. However, he then assured her with confidence that this time, she should aim at him and not worry about what happened next. Saris's heartbeat quickened. Then, without hesitation, she nodded in agreement. The hero raised an eyebrow, observing that she was no longer trembling. She exhaled, steadying herself, and admitted that if she became any more surprised, she might actually faint. After all, he was the one who had single-handedly defeated those monsters. She trusted him. At that moment, flames swirled around her, forming a glowing magic circle beneath her feet. 4 streams of energy materialized above her, each converging into smaller sigils within the larger one. A massive enchanted gateway appeared behind her, crackling with power. As it opened, a torrent of fire surged forward. Excitement breaking through her fear, Saris turned to the hero and declared that she had done it. The enormous fireball shot toward him. The hero watched with satisfaction. Then, with a mere flick of his finger, he encased the spell within a spherical barrier and redirected it skyward, where the fireball exploded harmlessly in the distance. He approached Saris, who stood frozen in shock, murmuring in disbelief that he had truly managed to contain it. His smile was reassuring, as he confirmed that she had successfully cast special tier magic, and that no one had been hurt. Saris's gaze lingered on him, admiration creeping into her expression as she hesitantly asked who he really was. The hero merely chuckled, his smile widening as he told her that his identity didn't matter. What truly mattered was that she had succeeded and should be proud of herself. His words snapped her back to reality. Even now, she could hardly believe she had succeeded. But the strain of the spell was evident. Her hands ached from the exertion. The hero, however, was lost in thought, realizing that she had far more potential than he had expected. In his mind, a new realization took shape. Magic users had weakened over the years, and if he wanted to change that, he needed to train more people properly. Turning to Saris, his expression grew serious as he asked what she thought about becoming his student. When Saris heard his proposal, she stared at him in shock, barely able to believe what he had just said. He wanted her as his student? The hero, unfazed by her reaction, simply narrowed his eyes and stated that, out of everyone in the academy, she was the most talented. She remained silent, processing his words. His voice was steady, filled with unwavering confidence as he continued, telling her that she was free to refuse. However, if she chose to accept, he would train her until she became one of the greatest mages in the world. His words lingered between them before he finally asked what she wanted to do. Saris clenched her fists. Determination flickered in her eyes as she admitted that he had completely changed her in just one day. There was no reason for her to refuse. A bright smile spread across her face as she looked at him, expressing her gratitude and asking him to take care of her from that moment forward. The next day, the hero and Saris ventured into the forest, where sunlight filtered through the towering trees, casting dappled shadows along their path. As they walked, the hero gave her a puzzled look, questioning why she had chosen to come there of all places. Saris hesitated before explaining that her grades in practical magic had been poor, which had resulted in her being assigned an extra mission. The hero raised an eyebrow at that, prompting her to elaborate. She told him that she needed to reach a monument deep in the forest and direct magic toward a device there. That was the mission. A sudden thought struck her, and she glanced at him, asking if he had been given the same mission as well. The hero frowned, uncertainty crossing his face as he questioned whether that was true. They continued deeper into the forest, the thick foliage whispering in the wind. Saris sighed, mentioning that she had been told to complete the mission as quickly as possible. Then, offering a sheepish smile, she admitted that after the last monster attack, she had been too afraid to come alone. The hero let out a short breath and informed her that all classes had been cancelled that day. She could have waited for him. Saris froze at his words, her face paling as realization dawned. In her desperation to complete the mission, she had rushed ahead without thinking. The hero regarded her with mild disappointment, wondering to himself whether his student was a little foolish. Scratching his head, he sighed before telling her that it didn't matter. She was safe now that he was there. Karis led the way, gripping the map tightly as she navigated through the dense forest. As they walked, the hero spoke his thoughts aloud, questioning the wisdom of sending students who couldn't even use beginner magic into a place like that. What would happen if they were attacked by monsters? Wiping sweat from her forehead, Karis reassured him that, so far, things had been fine. She explained that near the academy and along the kingdom's borders, most monsters were weak and did not attack humans. The hero frowned, unease settling in his chest. Monsters that didn't attack humans? That was rare. A thought suddenly struck Saris, and she mentioned that there was a giant lizard near the hill close to the academy. At her words, the hero's expression darkened as he recalled the very same creature, the one he had already defeated. Their conversation shifted as the hero glanced around at the vast, silent forest. He remarked that, from what he remembered, the area had once been filled with powerful monsters. Saris placed a hand on her chin, deep in thought. If that had been the case, she mused, then it must have been over 1,000 years ago. She explained that, thanks to the legendary magic sword saint who had defeated the Demon King, the demons had retreated from the kingdom, which had caused the monster's strength to decline. The hero pondered her words, resting his hand against his chin. That made sense, he admitted. With the demons gone, the monsters had grown weaker, and, as a result, human combat skills had deteriorated as well. A sudden prickle of danger crawled up his spine, making him stop. Something was coming. He turned sharply, his gaze locking onto a pack of wolves creeping toward them. A slow grin spread across his face as he pointed at them and asked Saris if she still believed they were harmless. Saris stiffened before quickly shaking her head in denial. Without warning, the wolves lunged. They moved fast, claws slashing, fangs bared. The hero remained calm. With a flick of his fingers, a gust of wind erupted from his palm, sending the creatures tumbling back. In the same breath, he conjured a blade from pure magic, and in a blur of motion, cut through the monsters with swift, deadly precision. Within moments, the wolves lay still, lifeless. He adjusted his hood and exhaled, remarking that it seemed monsters attacking humans was becoming more common. Saris swallowed hard and admitted that, at the academy, few students had real combat experience against monsters. If things continued as they were, she feared it would only be a matter of time before something terrible happened. As if in response to her words, rustling echoed from the surrounding trees. More figures emerged from the shadows, monsters, circling, closing in. The hero smirked, commenting that it was a good thing he had taken her as his student. Thanks to her, another mage would gain real battle experience. Saris blinked, confused, before her breath hitched in realization. The hero plucked the map from her trembling hands, remarking that slightly aggressive monsters would be perfect for training his student. Saris stiffened. She hesitated before finally asking if he was joking. The hero's smirk only widened. Then, without hesitation, he gave his command. She was to defeat them all. When Saris saw the wild wolves rushing toward her, a scream tore from her lips, fear flashing across her face. Behind her, the hero stood with his arms crossed, his voice calm and steady, as he told her to remain calm, assuring her that if she used her true power, creatures like these would be nothing. His words steadied her. Swallowing her fear, Karis focused, gathering energy as flames coiled around her, flickering with intensity. She raised her hands, her voice firm as she invoked her spell. A massive gate of fire materialized behind her, and from its depths, tongues of flame surged forward, engulfing the wolves. Within seconds, they were reduced to ash. Saris gasped, her eyes wide with disbelief and exhilaration, exclaiming that she had actually defeated them. The hero nodded approvingly, acknowledging her success and stating that it was as he had expected from his student. His tone then shifted to one of instruction as he explained that with experience, she would control her magic more efficiently, emphasizing that mastery was not just about power but also about knowing how to manage it. Before she could respond, a fresh pack of wolves emerged from the shadows. They leapt toward the hero, claws bared. Karis shouted a warning, but he remained unfazed. With the smallest shift of his head, he dodged the first attack. His fist shot out, crushing one wolf instantly. Moving with effortless speed, he dispatched the next two with swift, calculated blows. The last lunged at him with a snarl, but a single kick sent it crashing against a tree, lifeless. Turning to Saris, he placed a hand on his hip and stated his expectation for her to handle monsters in the same manner. She gaped at him in disbelief, protesting that he was asking the impossible. In response, the hero flexed his arm with a smirk, asserting that even mages should be ready for hand-to-hand combat, as it could save their lives. Saris simply stared at him, one hand on her lips, disbelief written across her face. She had prepared herself for a strict mentor, but she had never expected him to be so unorthodox. Her thoughts were interrupted when the hero declared that, from that moment on, he would leave the fighting to her. His words sent a shiver across her body. The journey continued, and when they finally reached their destination, the hero approached the stone monument with slow, deliberate steps. He glanced back at Saris, noting her exhaustion, and questioned what was wrong. Letting out an exasperated sigh, she grumbled that she was exhausted, explaining that she had pushed herself to the limit just getting there and had used special-grade magic at least 5 times. His expression remained unimpressed as he remarked that she was tired after just 5 spells. Saris shot him a look of sheer frustration, muttering that arguing with him was pointless. Then, despite her exhaustion, a triumphant grin broke through as she pointed out that at least they had made it. Breaking into a sprint toward the monument, she stated that if she channeled her energy into the device, the mission would be complete. However, before she could proceed, the hero sharply ordered her to stop. A blur of black shot through the trees, moving with unnatural speed before landing before them. A massive beast stood in their path, its face wolf-like, but twisted with unnatural malice. 2 black horns curved from its head, and its glowing red eyes burned with an eerie light. Saris's blood ran cold. The beast reared back and let out a deafening roar, the force of it creating a shockwave that sent her tumbling. Before she could hit the ground, the hero caught her effortlessly, his sharp gaze never leaving the creature. He realized that even mages from 1,000 years ago would have struggled against such an opponent. Without warning, the beast lunged at him. The hero met its charge, his energy sword clashing against its claws. Sparks flew as the 2 forces collided. Then the beast did something unexpected. It manipulated the debris around them, lifting shattered pieces of earth into the air. The hero's eyes narrowed as he recognized that it was using the environment as a weapon. The floating fragments shot toward him at deadly speed. He dodged swiftly, but his attention flickered toward Saris. He began to instruct her on what she needed to do while he handled the creature, but his words faltered when he noticed her actions. Behind the beast, Saris was already gathering energy. A smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Her hands trembled, but her voice remained steady as she admitted that she wasn't sure if her attack would work, that her body wanted to run. Yet, she clenched her fists, determination hardening her features, and declared that she would not flee, because her teacher was watching her. The beast turned toward her, sensing the rising energy. With a snarl, it hurled the floating debris in her direction. In an instant, the hero was beside her, his sword slashing through the incoming shards. Smirking, he assured her that he would handle anything that stood in his student's way. With that, he turned his attention back to the monster, engaging it once more, giving Saris the time she needed. Her spell ignited. A massive fireball formed at her fingertips before rocketing toward the beast. Flames engulfed it, consuming it in an inferno until nothing remained but ash. The fire spread, its energy pulsing toward the monument's device, activating it at last. After defeating the monster, Saris collapsed to the ground, gasping for breath. Exhaustion weighed heavily on her, yet she managed a weak smile as she murmured to herself that she had somehow done it. She had actually defeated it. Daria watched her with pride, arms crossed, as he told her she had done well. From that moment on, he assured her, no one would dare call her a failure. At first, Karis was stunned by his words, but doubt soon crept into her expression. She hesitated before voicing her concern, saying that no one from the academy had seen her fight, so they would likely assume she was lying. Daria met her gaze with unwavering confidence and reassured her that, although it might be difficult for others to believe at first, their perception of her would undoubtedly change after that day. As he spoke, his attention drifted toward the monument standing before them. Stepping closer, he studied the intricate carvings and the faint glow pulsing from the device embedded in it. He then explained that the structure channeled energy directly to the academy, adding that magic always carried traces of the caster. The device, he continued, transmitted that essence back to the academy, allowing them to identify who had completed a given task. Turning back to Saris, he flashed a playful grin before posing a question. What would happen if a special grade spell were cast on the device? At his words, Saris's face drained of color. She refused to believe it, but her voice trembled as she asked if all of the special grade magic had truly been transmitted to the academy. With a snap of his fingers, Daria confirmed her fears. Before either of them could react, cracks splintered across the surface of the device. A deep, ominous hum filled the air, before the monument finally gave way, shattering under the sheer force of the magic. Daria's eyes gleamed with excitement, while Ceres remained frozen, her face as pale as a ghost. Her hands trembled as she stared at the smoldering ruins, and with tears welling in her eyes, she whispered that she was going to be scolded for it later. Sure enough, by the time they returned to the academy, the bespectacled professor was already waiting for them, arms folded tightly, fury radiating from him. Ceres immediately tried to explain, stammering that there was a reason for what had happened. Behind her, Daria struggled to keep a straight face, barely able to hold back his laughter. The professor adjusted his glasses, their lenses gleaming ominously. Then, in a sharp, thunderous voice, he bellowed that, regardless of the excuse, nothing could justify turning the sacred monument into charcoal. Tears streamed down Ceres's face as she stammered an apology, while Daria, no longer able to contain himself, burst into hysterical laughter. The professor let out a deep sigh, pinching the bridge of his nose before muttering that if the Saint of the Magic Sword were alive, he would have something to say about the disaster. Daria, smirking, simply remarked that he doubted the Saint would care at all. After a brief pause, the professor exhaled before announcing that, for the time being, he would acknowledge that Ceres had completed the mission. Adjusting his glasses once more, he stated that the magic transmitted to the academy had been undeniably hers. At his words, Ceres blinked in surprise. Then, slowly, a wide smile spread across her face. The professor gave her a thoughtful look, before noting that both she and Daria Westgarden had once been considered failures. However, things had clearly changed, and he wanted to know why. Daria's expression softened as he replied that Ceres had never changed at all. Her talent had always been there, but no one had acknowledged it. No one, he added, except for himself. That, he concluded, was all there was to it. Suddenly, a realization struck him, and his eyes widened as he remembered something important. Turning to the professor, he quickly pointed out that he had been assigned the same task as Ceres. However, since the device had been destroyed, he had been unable to channel his magic through it. He then asked if that meant he was exempt. The professor merely raised a hand, cutting him off before stating that he was already aware of Daria's abilities. For that reason, he added, he was indeed exempt from the task. At the confirmation, Daria clenched his fist in silent triumph. Another victory. The professor, however, closed his eyes and rubbed his temples, as if the entire conversation had drained him. He muttered that, had Daria attempted to complete the task, he would have destroyed the monument as well. When he reopened his eyes, both Daria and Ceres were already gone. His gaze darted around before landing on the two of them strolling away, completely ignoring him. Anger flared across his face as he called out after Daria, shouting that their discussion was far from over. Daria, unfazed, merely waved a hand dismissively before turning to Ceres and suggesting that they see how the other students were reacting. As they wandered through the academy grounds, whispers surrounded them. One student murmured that Daria was the mage who had defeated the monsters that had attacked the academy. Another commented on the girl beside him, marveling at her incredible magical power. A third gasped before pointing out that Ceres was also the one who had burned the sacred monument. At the words, Ceres stiffened, a shiver running through her. Meanwhile, Daria grinned, remarking that the good rumors had begun to spread. Ceres, on the other hand, felt only embarrassment. Suddenly, a shriek from behind caught their attention. Daria glanced back and wondered aloud what was happening. Before he could investigate, a figure approached them. As he walked, the nearby students, particularly the girls, gawked at him, admiration clear in their eyes. His striking silver hair and piercing blue eyes made him impossible to ignore. Stopping before Daria, the young man smiled confidently before addressing him by name. Daria raised an eyebrow before confirming his identity, then asked who the stranger was. Before the newcomer could respond, Ceres leaned in and whispered to Daria that the young man was a swordsmanship prodigy. Daria's expression shifted slightly, intrigued. The young man then introduced himself in a polite yet firm tone, stating his name as Flem Riker, a third-year student in the swordsmanship division. With unwavering confidence, he got straight to the point. He explained that he had found himself in a rather complicated situation and, if possible, asked if Daria, the mage who had saved the academy, would be willing to duel him. Feeling a little confused about what was going on, the hero asked Flem Riker why he wanted to spar. Flem explained that the Supreme Swordsmanship Council was concerned about the recent monster attack incident. They were displeased that a magician had been the one to save the academy. So they had ordered him to compete with that person and demonstrate that he was more capable, proving it to everyone around. He sighed, closing his eyes and placing a hand on his head, admitting that it was embarrassing. The council was only concerned about protecting their authority. At first, the hero looked at Flem fiercely, but then he turned toward his disciple, Cheris, and with a puzzled expression while scratching his face, asked her what the Supreme Swordsmanship Council was. Flem was both confused and surprised at the question, while Cheris was extremely shocked. Whispering to her master, she admitted that she had been wondering for some time whether he had been forgetting too much lately. The hero, unsure how to respond, simply scratched the back of his head awkwardly. Ceres proceeded to explain that the Supreme Swordsmanship Council and the Central Magic Institute were the two main institutions in the country. The council governed all swordsmen, while the institute oversaw all magicians. Both wielded significant power, and the two institutions had been at odds for a long time. Still confused, the hero asked what she meant by at odds. Ceres whispered that the two factions had been fighting over which discipline, swordsmanship or magic, was superior. Upon hearing this, the hero scoffed, a look of contempt crossing his face. He dismissed the conflict as ridiculous, reasoning that superiority would depend on the situation. Ceres agreed, but pointed out that the rivalry had created real divisions, making it difficult for magicians and swordsmen to get along. At that moment, Flem asked if the hero would spar with him. Putting his hands together and winking, he added that he would appreciate it if the hero accepted as a favor to him. With a neutral expression, the hero calmly agreed. Flem was taken aback, surprised at his easy acceptance. The hero considered that it was a good opportunity to gauge the current level of swordsmanship. Remembering his fights with the bespectacled teacher and the purple-haired student, he looked slightly disappointed. If swordsmen were truly in conflict with modern magicians, he didn't have high expectations. As they walked, the hero, hands in his sleeves, asked Flem if he was really considered a genius swordsman. Flem, smiling modestly, downplayed the title. He claimed it wasn't impressive, stating that he simply liked swords a little more than others. As he spoke, his aura flared, confidence shining in his eyes. Meanwhile, Karis approached the hero and whispered a warning, reminding him that Flem was known as the strongest swordsman in the academy and urging him to be careful. The hero smirked, reassuring her with confidence that she need not worry. Her master wasn't just at the top of the academy. He stood at the pinnacle of the world. When they arrived at Burrito Academy's arena, the hero looked around in amazement, murmuring that he hadn't realized a place like this existed within the academy. His attention was soon drawn to Karis, who waved at him with a joyful expression. However, she was quickly pushed aside by a group of girls who had gathered to cheer for the handsome Flem. Seeing this, the hero responded with a sarcastic smile. Flem handed his sword to one of his followers before stepping into the weapons storage room. Selecting a wooden sword, he turned to the hero and informed him that he would fight using that weapon, allowing the hero to use magic freely if he wished. However, when the hero also picked up a wooden sword, he smirked and declared that he had no intention of using magic. The statement shocked Flem so much that he froze in place. The hero grinned confidently, insisting that they should stick to swordsmanship. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fair. With a serious expression, Flem pointed out that he had heard the hero was a magician. Examining his weapon, the hero calmly responded that while he could use magic, that did not make him a magician. Flem, assuming the hero was underestimating him, shot him a fierce gaze before acknowledging his words and stepping toward the arena. Watching him, the hero wondered why Flem seemed angry. Then, realization struck. In modern times, it was common for individuals to choose either magic or swordsmanship exclusively. Observing Flem's aura and serious expression, the hero surmised that the swordsman likely assumed someone who chose magic was merely playing with a sword for fun. Smirking, the hero recalled his battle against the monsters, and suddenly remembered that he had already demonstrated his swordsmanship in that fight. Lowering his hand from his chin, He looked at Flem and apologized for any misunderstanding, assuring him that he had not meant to insult him. Then, as blue energy surrounded his entire body, he stated with conviction that he took pride in his swordsmanship. With a serious expression, he declared that if they crossed swords, Flem would understand right away. Flem, his gaze cold, challenged the hero to show him the swordsmanship of someone who also used magic. Suggesting they begin on the count of 3, Flem initiated the match. As soon as the countdown ended, Flem dashed toward the hero at full speed, a sharp glint in his eyes. At close range, he swung his sword with full power, aiming to finish the fight in a single strike. However, the hero effortlessly parried the attack. Shocked, Flem gritted his teeth and launched a relentless barrage of attacks. But no matter the angle or speed, the hero blocked every strike with ease. Running out of options, Flem gathered energy into his sword and unleashed a flurry of strikes. When the smoke cleared, the hero remained standing, pride evident on his face. Flem lunged forward once more, his determination unwavering. With a powerful leap, he soared into the air, frustration evident in his expression. Raising his sword high above his head, he swung down with all his strength, intent on breaking through his opponent's defense. But in an instant, his efforts proved futile. Our hero remained rooted in place, effortlessly blocking the strike. The sheer force of the attack sent a gust of wind rippling across the battlefield. Yet he stood firm, unmoved by the impact. Flem's eyes widened in disbelief as he struggled to catch his breath. Staring at his opponent, a realization struck him. His opponent was just like the legendary magic sword saint. The hero looked down at his shattered sword and smiled. Admitting that it had been a while since he had experienced such a satisfying fight, he tossed the broken weapon into the air, clenched his fist, and declared that he would no longer hold back. With a hand gesture, the hero summoned a gust of wind, sending the wooden sword soaring toward him. Catching it mid-air, he locked eyes with Flem, excitement flashing across his face as he gripped the weapon tightly. He declared that they should continue. A surge of energy radiated from his body, his aura swelling in intensity. He then added that they should make the sparring match fun. Without warning, he stomped the ground with immense force, shattering the earth beneath him. In an instant, he vanished, only to reappear right in front of Flem. Before Flem could react, the hero swung his sword with overwhelming power, striking him squarely and sending him flying backward. Flem struggled to regain his balance, but the hero gave him no respite. Blow after blow, he pressed the attack, forcing Flem onto the defensive. Just as a powerful strike aimed for his stomach, Flem managed to evade at the last second, stepping back. Though exhaustion had begun to creep in, his eyes still burned with determination. The hero, on the other hand, only grew more exhilarated, realizing once again that Flem was truly a genius swordsman. The two clashed again, their swords meeting in a flurry of rapid strikes. Each collision sent bursts of wind rippling through the air. The hero launched a slash aimed at Flem's face, but Flem gritted his teeth and barely managed to block. Even though the hero wasn't holding back, he noted that there was no sign of Flem faltering. At that moment, Flem's form blurred. He reappeared above the hero, his sharp gaze locked on his opponent. Seeing this, the hero smirked, convinced that even if Flem had lived 1,000 years ago, he would still be considered a genius. Their swords met in a deafening clash, the sheer force of the impact stunning the onlookers. The sound echoed across the battlefield, leaving the audience in awe. Then, the hero noticed it, a crack forming on his sword. He muttered that the weapon was too fragile. Flem, gripping his own blade with both hands, nodded in agreement. He admitted that the hero's attacks were incredibly powerful, and that he had never seen his sword crack like that before. For a moment, Flem hesitated before lowering his gaze. He then acknowledged that he owed the hero an apology, admitting that his skill with the sword was unquestionable. Taking a deep breath, he sincerely apologized for having doubted him. The hero smiled, remarking that Flem was a man of principle, and that he couldn't say he disliked that. Flem exhaled, a faint smile tugging at his lips as he thanked the hero for understanding. The tension between them eased, but the battle was far from over. The hero then stated that since they had fought seriously, Flem should call him by his first name, saying there was no need to be so formal. Flem blinked, momentarily caught off guard. As a massive blue aura swirled around him, the hero added that after all, he was Flem's junior. Flem smirked, remarking sarcastically that the hero truly was a troublesome junior. Lowering his sword slightly, Flem's expression turned serious as he suggested that they should finish the duel before their swords shattered completely. The hero's grin widened as he agreed wholeheartedly, calling Flem senpai once again. Flem raised his weapon once more, declaring that he would challenge the hero with all his heart and soul. A sudden burst of energy erupted from his sword, enveloping it in a vibrant purple glow. Then, with a powerful swing, he unleashed his ultimate technique, Unyielding Flash. A storm of violet slashes rained down, each strike carrying his full strength. The hero's eyes widened in astonishment, realizing that the technique was beyond the level of an academy student. But there was no hesitation in his movements. With razor-sharp focus, he weaved through the onslaught, dodging each strike with remarkable agility. Closing the distance, he surged forward, blade poised. Then, just inches before his strike connected with Flem's neck, he stopped. With a calm yet triumphant expression, he stated that if he couldn't evade all of Flem's attacks, he wouldn't be able to call himself the Magic Sword Saint. Flem's chest rose and fell with heavy breaths. His grip on his sword weakened before he finally let it slip from his fingers, the weapon clattering to the ground. Admitting defeat, Flem stated that it had truly felt like he was fighting the legendary Magic Sword Saint. Though he had lost, his expression held no bitterness, only satisfaction. A familiar voice suddenly rang out as Saris ran toward them, beaming with excitement and congratulating the hero. He turned to her with a smile, thanking her for her support. Before they could continue their conversation, however, a group of girls rushed past Karis, swarming Flem with encouragement. One of them cheered that, even though he had lost, he would always be the best. Another gushed that Flem was the most amazing person ever. Watching the scene unfold, the hero sighed in annoyance, while Karis stifled a laugh beside him. Once the girls had finally dispersed, Flem approached the hero and extended a hand. He expressed his gratitude, calling the match incredible and thanking him by name. The hero grasped his hand firmly, stating that the honor had been his. Then, lowering his voice, he asked if Flem was sure about all this, reminding him that the Supreme Swordsmanship Council had ordered him to defeat him. Flem's smile faded slightly as he confirmed that the council would indeed be furious. He admitted that if they discovered he had lost to someone who wielded both magic and swordsmanship, they would likely expel him. Gritting his teeth, he muttered that creating a divide between magicians and swordsmen was such a ridiculous notion. Then, as if struck by a sudden realization, he murmured that if only there were a faction that accepted both magic users and swordsmen. A silence fell between them. Behind them, Saris suddenly tensed, sensing something ominous. She glanced at the hero warily, asking what he was thinking. A wide grin spread across his face, his eyes gleaming with excitement. He then declared that he would create one. Flem arched an eyebrow and questioned what exactly he meant. Standing tall, the hero placed his hands on his hips and proclaimed with conviction that he would establish a faction. Flem's eyes widened in shock. Undeterred, the hero continued, his voice filled with determination. It wouldn't matter whether someone was a swordsman or a magician. He would create a faction that welcomed both.